Hi, I'm set up here ready to demonstrate a game of Tokyo Express. It's a new solitaire game system back in the year 1988 by John Southard. Now it's a well-liked game. It's stood the test of time that people are still buying, as in really all those solitaire games back from that period. People still like to pick them up on the second-hand market and play them. It's a game that I have sort of mixed feelings about, but it's nevertheless it's a really interesting experience to play, and I'd like to give you some demonstration of it in this. Now you can see we have Withdrawal Canal down here, we have Savo Island here, and we have what was called the slot here. Iron Bottoms, what became called Iron Bottoms Sound here, where many ships were sunk in battles. We have Cape Esperance here, and essentially what's happening is the Japanese and the Americans are fighting for control of this island here, and during the night the Japanese have started bringing in ships through the slot and reinforcing their forces and maybe bombarding American forces and American air base the Americans are building on Guadalcanal to assist in the effort for that island. So the Americans are only ever able to sort of grab together scratch forces of ships to try and stop this, and the fighting was always a kind of fast and furious, because at night obviously it was very difficult to see what was going on. So this game, in this game you are the American force admiral or admirals, and the game system will control the Japanese forces. Now the game itself contains 4 historical scenarios as well as a basic game, so it has a sort of separate game folder just for a very basic game, which just gives you the a movement and combat features, and then the standard game brings in movement of hidden forces before battle comes in, and some more sort of bells and whistles and subtle extra bits. And there's also some advanced and optional rules as well. So the main game, the standard game, contains 4 historical scenarios. I think I played 1 or 2 of those before, but I think where this game really shines is in what they call the hypothetical scenarios. Now, these are not what ifs, so what if Japan was doing something completely different in this part of the sea, but they are what if, they're hypothetical based on the situation. So the Japanese are always trying to resupply Guadalcanal, and so you can have, for example, there's this one, end run, the American forces on station well to the northwest of Savo Island. When a radar plot comes, warnings of Japanese forces approaching well off either flank, heading for Guadalcanal. So in that one the Americans are stationed here, and Japanese forces come from here, and you have to try and deal with that split force. The one I'm going to play today is this one. Is that right? Hang on. Better just catch up with myself, because I just played a couple. Yes, Chase from the Southwest. Yes, that's right. I didn't start at the beginning. So the naval American forces stationed off the west coast of Guadalcanal. So essentially what that means, you can place your force anywhere within this area marked 10. Naval intelligence now reports the Japanese coming from the north. The race is on to stop them before they reach the transport area. So the transport area is here and here, what they call Japanese deployment zones. Well, no, sorry, the transport area is actually off here. So the Americans are bringing in transports here, and so the Japanese will be coming on from the north trying to reach the transports. Their code has been cracked, hasn't it? So we know roughly what they're going to do. We don't know exactly how it's going to happen. So the key is to stop any Japanese forces moving off the edge here. Now, one of the main ways to do that is to put yourself in the way, because as soon as the Japanese come near to you, they have to enter what's called, they start off in mission movement. So mission movement determines their heading based upon these red symbols here. So if they're in this 7 zone, on a 3 to 10, they're going to move over here towards this area, which is where they're always really trying to get to. Either they might try and enter here, which is when they're going to be supplying their lighter ships or be offloading supplies, or they're going to be going off here to bombard American forces, transports, airfields, so forth. So if they enter these deployment zones, they will then move either to supply or to move off the board. But that's in mission movement. You can see, like, if they start up here, they might actually start going down here or straight across. So if they start here, they're always going to be heading in this direction. So from where they appear, you have some sense, knowing their target area, which direction they're going to go to. But they can befuddle you. You know, they can start off around here and then come around here, or they might come straight over. But the point is once they get to these zones, they will start to move off, unless they're close enough to you and you have detected you, and in which case they enter battle movement, and then they cannot leave the table. They have to, you're essentially circling around trying to defeat each force before they can continue their mission. So by putting yourself in between them and where they're trying to get you is a sure way to get detected and to have them engage you rather than go on for their mission. But without being a bit more careful, it's a surefire way to get yourself sunk. It's not an easy game to win, at least for me. I don't think I've won it in all the 4 games I've played. 2 just recently, I definitely didn't. So anyway, so that's your scenario. Then there's a few hypothetical scenarios. So you have these ones, then there's chase from the north. So the US is coming from the north. In this case, the Japanese are coming from the north. Then there's waiting on station, slamming the door. So Japanese have actually performed a mission. They're trying to escape, and you're trying to get as many of them as you can. There's a US convoy, so you're actually escorting a convoy. And then I played this one just where the Japanese are escorting a convoy. And then there's also some, so the normal missions the Japanese can have are supply or bombardment. Then they might have these special missions, like if there's a convoy, there's also extra missions that can be added in. So there's a lot of variation that can happen, and any one scenario will not play out the same way twice either, because what you do is you lay your hidden forces, and there's 8 spaces, 8 little Japanese flags, and depending on the scenario, like in this one I know they're going to come on here, here or here, and most of them are going to be heading south, but some might be heading southwest. So that's kind of like the naval intelligence that we have based on their general operations, and also what maybe that we actually know what they're trying to do tonight. But it's not certain, so you can see these are what are called hidden forces. And it's got a port and a starboard side, its direction arrow, and then its number. So I've got 7 of those on here, and 4 are heading south and 3 are heading southwest in that direction, determined by die roll. So I know the probabilities, but not the exact whatnot. Now, each scenario, you start by you randomly roll in Japanese strength, each of the hypothetical scenarios. So you can see this can range from 3 to 8, which is quite a big disparity. So even if I play this scenario again, if I rolled a different force, I might get, for example, a likely force of battleships on 8, or with 3, it's just going to be destroyers and maybe some light cruisers. And that will also determine the amount of destroyers or light cruisers and etc. what you have. So then you roll for the date of the battle. So it could be early, late, 42 or 43. That determines what kind of radar you have, and maybe what if you have better torpedoes as the Americans. Then you check their cohesion. Again, the later it is, the better their cohesion. Essentially, cohesion means that you start off with your forces, and in a task force, if you break off another task force and you only have, say, one admiral, then this other task force will have to roll for cohesion and might perform a manoeuvre that you didn't want it to do. So that gets better as the years go on. Then there's your radar type. There's 3 types of radar you can have. And then you check the lighting conditions. So it could actually be a bright moonlit night. It might be an average, some clouds in the sky, or it might be a dark, moonless night, which is going to affect detection ranges and so forth. Then you might check to see if you have some transports around that you have to defend. You can bring in random events as advanced rules. I'm not using them now. And then you go to the forces, and this is key. So essentially, I rolled for strength level of 5 for this one, and that means that you get 7 hidden forces on game turn 1, and then 6 on game turn 3. So the Japanese always come in 2 waves, the first on game turn 1, the second on game turn 3. And they can range from 6 and 6 to 9 and 8 hidden force markers. So you could get between 12 and 17 of these hidden forces, and many of them are going to be blanks. So then you put each time one is revealed, you pull one of these markers out of the cup. Now in my case, 8 of those markers are going to be 0, so they're blanks. Then there's 2 at 1, 2 at 2, 1 at 3, and none at 4 or 5. Now when we actually reveal the hidden forces, we go to this table down here, and we will take the force size value on the marker. So that red marker, if it was 5, I would then roll the d10, and I could either get a screen of 2 DDs, main force of 3 CAs, or I could get 3 CAs and 1 DD at the lower range, or all the way up to here where I'm getting 2 battleships, 2 CAs and 3 DDs. Or here we're going to get 2 DDs on the screen. So you can see. And then down here we range from 2 DDs or 2 DDs up to 1 CL and 3 DDs. So my largest force is 3. So the largest force, I could get a battleship. I could be up against the battleship. But there's only one of those markers in my cup. Is that right? Yes. And then there's two markers of this and 2 markers of this. And there's another thing is that that's still not certain. They're not necessarily all out there, because the Japanese strength level is 5. So I mark it down here. I've also marked it here to remind myself, because say I draw the 3 marker and then the 2 marker, then that is equal to 5, so I won't be drawing another 2 or either of the 2 1 markers. Or I might draw 2 1 markers and a 2 and then the 3, so it could go over, but I can't draw another marker after that. So that sort of cleverly limits but determines a nice range of forces that you're up against with some uncertainty in it. Then you roll for your US ships, and you roll for the number of each type you have. So you see it could range all the way from 3 DDs up to 9, 2 CLCAs up to 8, and you have some modifiers. I don't remember what the modifier on the DD roll is, because you roll for that first, and then if that's low you add 2 on this one. So if you have low roll here, you're going to get slightly higher roll here. Now I didn't get much. I actually got 4 DDs and 4 CLs. Now what you can then do is you can trade 4 DDs up to a CL or a CA, which is what I did. So I have no DDs, and then you can trade 3 CLCAs up to a BB, battleship, which is what I did. So I ended up with 1 battleship, and you randomly draw them out. I've got the California, and then the CA Vincennes, and the North Orleans. You randomly draw them, but it does say that the US tends to operate in pairs. So if you draw 1 CA, make sure you get another CA, or if you draw a CL, make sure you get another CL, like that. Now the ships, you have a wide range of ships for each side that can possibly appear, and some of them are ahistorical, so they're ones that were around but weren't actually in any of the battles in this area, but they could well have been. So you've got BBs, heavy cruisers, light cruisers and destroyers down here, and similar for the Japanese underneath. And that's yellow markers a big 5. I made a mistake and wrote 4, but 5 again. It's to remind me about the Japanese strength level, because I played this before and ended up drawing all the red chips, which meant I had masses of Japanese ships, no chance against them. So I need to make sure I restrict their level to what's reasonable. Then finally roll for admirals, so you might get just a commander, or destroyer admiral, or heavy ship admiral, or I actually got 3 admirals, a commander and 2 admirals, so each ship has got an admiral on them. The only difference they make is that a few of them have a detection of 1, so they give you an extra detection. The other difference they make is if their ship goes down, you lose some victory points for the admiral as well. And then you check to see if either side is surprised or if neither is surprised, and in my case neither. If the US, for example, is surprised, they don't get to move until they are released. I'm not surprised, so they can move straight away. So then we put the game turn 1 markers out there, and we know these are the American ships. We don't know what the Japanese ships will be yet. Then we go to our sequence of play track, and we start with, you can see I've added a couple of annotations because there's never actually enough. No matter how great player aids are, I always find I need to add some more to them. So we start with Japanese Hidden Force Activity Stage, game turn 1 only. So on game turn 1 only the Japanese move. And essentially what that means is the direction that they're heading in, they just move. Speed can be from 1 to 6, and they always go at 6 if they count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the only activity on the first game turn. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's game turn 1 over, and you can see it can go all the way up to 10 game turns. Here I've just, normally these chits would be on the American ships, and then I'd also be marking what they're going to do and their speed they're at on the actual ship, or for one ship in the formation. I'm just putting it down here for ease of play for me. So a second game turn, we start with the action chit phase. Now what that means is there's 2 chits in 1 chit of US detection, 1 chit of Japanese detection, 1 chit of combat, and then 15 blank chits. I'm using some other chits for it. What that means, we now have 6 phases with separate segments in them, and you draw 3 chits each time. So, but I'll get to that in a minute. But first we start with Japanese re-entry. Okay, so some Japanese ships might have gone off, and then they've been a couple of turns bombarding, shooting up transports, whatever, then they can come back on. Then we go to the US formation phase. So now I decide what formations I'm going to have. A formation, the ships have to be within 2 hexes of each other and heading the same direction. So that would have to be 2 separate formations. You have to be careful you don't accidentally break up your formations as you play. You can allow column movement, so you could put a chit, say, okay, so they're actually in a column. There's just, well, actually it'd have to be they're in column. So they will be heading the same direction. I'm going to keep 1 formation just to keep things easy, so I'm not splitting that up. And there's lots of counters in the game. These are the forces. Then you have various markers, and some of them are for different task forces. Then the US movement orders phase. So I will decide what sort of movement I want my fellows to do in the next six segments. So I could just have them go straight ahead. I could have them turn 60 at some point. I could have them turn 120 at some point. I could have them do an S turn so that they will end up facing the same direction but on a different line, as it were. I could have them move about, and I would decide their speed. So I started them here, and I'm thinking I'm not going to have time to go around here and engage them, so I'm just going to cut straight across here, try and catch them as these ones come around. Then I'll have to leave these for later, and perhaps hope they're just bogeys perhaps. So I'm going to give them a 60-degree order to turn. It's ports this direction, isn't it? Yes. So 60 degrees, that's 120, 60 degrees to port. Okay, and then US freedom of action phase. Now what that is if, as I said before, if say I've got two task force, only this one has an admiral, that one has to check for his freedom of action. Generally you get it, but not always, so it's risky. Then we go to Japanese hidden forces placement phase. Now if this was game turn 3, the rest of the hidden forces will come on and rolled for areas. Then Japanese formation phase. Now we have no formations because we've got just hidden forces, so there's no ships actually out to be in formation. First Japanese movement orders phase, and that includes mission movement or battle movement, and then we have random events, which I'm not going to do. So mission movement is what I described earlier, so I just roll for that now. So because these fellows are in this zone 5, on 8 to 10 they head that way, otherwise they carry on heading south. So that's a 4 and a 10, so one of them's turning like that. These ones in here could head in 3 directions, so they could possibly go that way, and in fact one of them's going that way, one's going that way, and the third is going that way. Now you can see what happens in this game is that at the start they were one was facing that way, and now he's facing another way, and then the other one. It's very kind of like random what they're going to do, so you have to kind of okay, so those ones end up doing that. You have to kind of determine to yourself that this is just, they're kind of like possible, if possibilities of movement, and perhaps momentary blips on the radar, but no firm like directions. So the Japanese, it might have seemed they were going that way, but no, they were actually going that way. And there's no battle movement because nobody has been detected. So now we go to the activity stage. This is the heart of the game turn, those 6 movement segments. So we start with US movement, then Japanese movement. If there's 3 or more ships in the hex, there may be a collision, and then we draw those action chits. So essentially they all just go 1 in the direction they're heading. Now you can speed some of this up. If there's, like say if the Americans are over here and Japanese are over here, they're never going to detect each other, so I could just move those ones up here, all their 6. Which ones did I move just now? I've lost track. Anyway, it doesn't really matter too much. Okay, and then should have moved the Americans first, just 1 forward. And then we draw 3 chits, and I've actually already drawn my 3 chits first, and so for the first 3 segments there were no interesting chits, so I just move everyone 2 more. That's another way you can speed up, by drawing the action chits and stopping when saying where the Americans are going to move. And I forgot to turn them 60. 1, 2. Okay, so the Americans are moving in column, and now I've turned them I can remove that so I don't do it again, and they will continue for 3 more hexes in this direction for the rest of the turn. But something might happen in between. So at this halfway point we come to the second Japanese movement orders phase. So again we have to check if there's any battle movement. Now because no one's detected, there's no battle movement, so we just roll again on the mission movement. So that one's always going to go there if he's in that sector. This fellow is continuing in that direction. he's continuing in that direction. Now the Japanese will never actually hit. They will move around an island. Okay. So that's the Japanese. So the Japanese can change their direction halfway through, which I guess was determined. So it's not too predictable. If it's too predictable for the American player, I guess you don't have a fun game. So we go to the fourth and give them all one segment of movement, and then no collisions, so we go to the chit draw. So all important chit draw, and I have 3 blanks. Okay, so another segment of movement, and these ones are going to move around the island. There's a rule determining which direction they're going to go, and I think it's the easiest. They turn 60 degrees rather than 120, so I did that. I take 3 more blanks, and I have a... Oh, look at that. We have 2 things going on. So US detection and combat happening. Now the US detection came out first, so we'll do that first. There's a rule which says which one goes first. So US detection. Now what we have is, because we have bright light, we have visual detection range for the Japanese is 15. Visual detection range for the US is only 12. They weren't quite so adept at that. Then you can see you have a shorter range for tracking. So you can detect them, but can you track them? If a force becomes revealed, but then if it falls out of the tracking range, it can become a hidden force again. You also have the visual fire direction range. So that's how far your fire is effective. So you might be able to see them, but you might not be able to fire on them effectively. And then finally the American has the same things for their radar. So you can see that's shorter range, but we have bright light. These values would be very different if it was a dark turn, and it might be more effective for the Americans to use their radar. And it is really if they have the range for it. So what is in the visual detection range of the US forces? Well, unfortunately we've got Savo Island in the way of all of those fellows and this fellow, but these ones are possibly visible. So we go to our handy booklet. So it's actually separate chart tables. I put them in booklet format because that just makes it a lot easier. And we go to the detection table. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So counting from any hex, any ship in a force, and each force gets to roll 2 detection attempts against separate hidden forces, we say. So we've got 7 hexes. The US is here. You can see the Japanese visual detection range. It has different factors, so it's all carefully thought out. We're in bright light. We're not doing the radar, so 7 hexes. Well, hang on, we might do radar. So on a 3 or higher, we're going to get some result. If we're using the radar, and we're actually in late war now, let me just check. So yes, haven't used it before. We've got the late SG radar, so it's the best form of radar available to the Americans here. We are fortunate enough to have that. So if we're on late SG, it's 7. Okay, it's still not. It's a better roll. Yeah, it's a better column. So we use radar detection. Now there's visual detection modifiers and radar detection modifiers, so that will determine something for you. We've got enough functioning radar, and there's no surprise or anything. We don't know rough sizes yet, and I got an admiral with a detection value of +1, so I'm going to use that. So I roll the d10, I get a 3, +1 is a 4. That's not going to be great, but we were on this column, and we have a D, which is detection. Now an F, we would just draw a force size marker, but actual detection we will see the ships. And if I had a D, an I result, we would get able to immediately fire upon them. So we have some ships. So first of all, what we do, well, we have a definite sighting, I should say. So we draw one of these. If it's a 0, which it is, we can rule that out. Okay, so that was one detection attempt. And the other detection attempt, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hexes. At visual, we're on that column, and with the radar, we're on the same column. So I'll stick with that. I roll a 5. +1 for the Admiral. Again, detection. Being quite fortunate here. And it's another bogey. So we've ruled out 2 possibilities, which is great, because so the main force is definitely going to be here, unless that happens to be a 3 size force marker. Okay, so that's the US detection. Note, if we did have an I result, we could have had an immediate attack, and then now we have, and they wouldn't fight back, then now we also have combat in which both sides can mutually fight. So we then we go to the combat segment. That was the detection segment. Again, could have been a random event. We would check any forces that were detected, maybe they are out of tracking range and they become undetected with detection attempt, and if we can, we have immediate fire stats. That takes us through them. But we're here now. Random event possibly in advanced. First attack step if undetected, and that is the case. So the US so if there are undetected forces, they get a first attack step, maybe both sides. But then in the second attack step, detected or undetected forces can go. But we would start that with US illuminate Japanese. So a US ship can choose to illuminate a Japanese ship, which means they are both easier to hit. You're shining a searchlight. Then you get Japanese combat. So the Japanese combat is always first. But it's just for record keeping, because you'll actually adjust damage at the end of both those combats. So, but there's no Japanese forces that can target. So in fact, this combat chit is wasted. No one can see anyone else. And we'll go back to the 6th movement, and that has to include, because it's the last 3 chits in the cup, the Japanese detection. So we'll do the last move, and then the Japanese get a chance to detect. Now you need a ruler for this. You have handy dots in the middle of the hexes, and we'd see, can they see past that island? Yes, they just can. Where was he? He was there. He was there. So the Japanese can actually try and detect that force. So range of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I should actually have on that force an undetected mark, and the hidden forces, we're assuming they're all undetected. So in bright light at 6 hexes, the Japanese roll a 10, and that is going to mean I won't even bother check for the modifiers because they're well within this eye range. So that hidden force can now perform an immediate attack. Now the Americans are detected, but no, the Americans have not detected the Japanese. So what happens now is you go to the sneaky surprise torpedo attacks table, and and this is another way, so which you can eliminate bogeys. First I have to see what kind of force that is attacking, so I draw a force mark chit, and unfortunately it's a 0, so that is a dummy. Otherwise we would know the rough force, and we have, and it gives you, each of those chits gives you a number of torpedo salvos and a maximum number of torpedoes that could be fired. And effectively what it is the US just see torpedoes or field torpedoes impacting on their ships from out of the darkness with no knowledge of where the opponent was. So, but then obviously they know which direction the torpedoes came from, and perhaps some sense of the distance they had travelled. So you would have a sort of a known force in that area. But as it was, that was a fake, and none of those other Japanese can detect. So that is the end of the second game turn. So now we move to the third game turn, and the first thing you do is you put all those action chits back in your cup, and you go to the Japanese. Well, the US first order their ships. So the US has to decide what they're going to do before we know what the Japanese initial headings are going to be. So that is the situation that we have on this third game turn. And the US doesn't even know when the Japanese new forces are going to, whereabouts they're going to be. So we know there's going to be some more coming from up this end. I still want to keep steaming this way, so I'm just going to be 6 speed full ahead, so no need for any marker for that. Okay, so Japanese hidden forces placement, so I check my scenario and I see that the first two come on at 7 and 8 headed south, which is directly towards that supply zone, the Japanese deployment zone. And next two come on at 6 and 7 headed southwest. Okay, and then the last two the same, 6 and 7 headed southwest. They never go on the same hex, although that stacking can occur in movement. Okay, so that's the extra forces we have, and then we roll for Japanese movement down here. And okay, so he's going that way, and the others 3 still moving down this way, and that's that. No battle movement yet, so we go to the first US movement, then the Japanese movement. So these all come down 1, and I'll draw 3 action chits, and we actually get a Japanese detection chit coming out. So now we see who can see what. So there's 2 forces up there that could possibly detect, and that's the only 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you can see Savo Island comes in very handy, and also can be annoying, for detection. But without that island there, it would be a lot less interesting, this manoeuvring around this area of sea. There's also advanced rules for radar effects, like depending where a land is, if in relation to the radar searching ship, and the force the land can pull off your track. What was it? 16. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, so we're just in visual detection range. And I need a minimum of a 9 or a 10, and I got 1 and a 9. So on a 9, it's force. So that's no effect on the US. So that's nothing there. So let's see. So just to speed it up a little, I'm drawing 2 sets of chits, and so we end up with combat on the 3rd segment. So I'll just move everyone forward 2, because nothing's going to change in their plots. The Americans are going straight ahead at this point. And now we have the combat checked. Well, nobody's detected, so again we just go forward. So it just all depends on the Japanese movement and when their detection check comes out, which happens to come out in the 4th segment. So first we go for the 3rd. Note the Americans don't get to change direction. this is the thing which gives me mixed feelings about the game, is that when I first got it and I saw you have that tracking of movement, and then you have this battle movement chart, quite an intricate chart determined. You have an American reference ship, and depending on where the Japanese forces in relation to that reference ship, they have a different possibilities of what their plot is going to be. But you can see that what the end result is that it's quite random. So you can actually have a force moving this direction one moment, and not actually in a mission movement, which we're doing now, but in the battle movement, it could suddenly, the next check, which happens twice in every turn for the Japanese, it's moving completely opposite direction, which the American can never do, because you have to, the fastest you can turn is 60 degrees, like that, and then you could then turn another 60 degrees, and then another 60 degrees, but you see that's taken you 3 segments to turn around, and you've moved a significant portion of sea away. And it frustrated me, because I was kind of like, well, how can I possibly decide what to do with my American force where the Japanese can just cheat? They can just be here and then they can be there, and there's nothing I can do about it. But I figured out now that it's all, even when you have a force displayed and you're in battle movement, it's more simulating. It's night time, and for a brief moment you might see their flashes, but you think they're turning a certain direction, but then they're actually traveling in completely opposite direction or turning in a different way. And so it's not daytime. You never have perfect information on the enemy movement, even if you are tracking and radar obviously at that time was more primitive than it is now. So where was I? So I've moved all those. The US is going 1, 2, 3 straight ahead, still undetected. Oh no, sorry, 1, 2. Oh, sorry, it's the US detection. So I move everyone one more, and that the US has a chance of detection. Of course, we just did the Japanese detection, so there's 2 there which they can possibly detect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can see it's all on this chance table. You're trying to close in, but also thinking what possibilities are where. You don't want to sort of be right in the middle and suddenly you find yourself surrounded. So we've got the LSG at 7 and 8, so I'm rolling a 6 on this one, which is detection, and a 3 on the other one, which is also force detection. So this one turns out to be nothing, and this one turns out to be nothing. Okay, so it's actually nice to have that, because you're clearing the seas of possible bogeys. Okay, so there we are at the end of the 3rd turn. So now we move to the 4th turn. We put our chits back in the cup, and the US are happy in their position. They don't want to get on this side of this force. Well, they could, because if they're close, they would draw them into combat, but they don't want them to get away. So I think the US is just going to steam on 6 speed this direction. So we just roll for the starting directions of all these fellows. Yep, and so they're tending to move down, and then over here all of them moving this way. So in the slot they're coming that way around Savo Island. Likely it could change on a 1 to 3 in this zone. They could go back that way. So I'm just going to see how the chits come out, so we can see how far we can move people before something happens. And again, on the second phase, I get a US detection and a Japanese detection. That's exciting. Now, the Japanese detection always happens first. They were more alert and more keen-eyed. They've been training in darkness for months, if not years, for some of them. I don't know the truth of that, but definitely for months. So that's on the second. So we have 2 movement. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And did I move the Americans? I think I did, didn't I? Yes. Okay. So Japanese detection. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15. Okay, so 1's too far away. 1 gets a 4, that's a miss. So we need a 9 or a 10. What's the visual detection? There's only 1 ship, the hidden force. Speed. Yeah, if the US was travelling at a lower speed, they would be harder to detect, but I need... okay, and if they're in the rear, it's harder to detect. But that's not the case, so no modifiers. So the modifiers are on speed, if they're in the rear, the size of, respect to the size of forces, and if there's an admiral present. Okay, there's 1 there, no, and there's no one else. So the Japanese did not succeed. The Americans do not have a visual detection range because they only have 12 and their radar's going out to 7. Hang on, I've got the LSG radar, that goes out further. Okay, the late SG, I hadn't used that before, so I'd got an old figure for that. So that late SG, maximum radar detection range is 14 hexes, that's great. Tracking range of 12. And I just need to note down the visual fire detection range, because that's important in gunnery combat. As I said before, you can't fire. It's always 7. So even with better radar, fire direction is not any more effective. Okay, so 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, there's 2 I can try. This one and this one. It's extreme range though, so it's unlikely we're going to get a result. Let's see. A 5 and a 4. No, nothing. So then we have 1 more movement each. And I'm sorry, I would sort of edit, or normally I used to pause my videos, but I got a new camera, an Apple iPhone, and you can't pause on the video function that it has, which I find incredible. And I found tried 2 or 3 different apps that offer pause, but then the sound comes out terrible on them, or there's another problem with one of them. So, and editing just takes such a long time for me, and it's such a chore. It's not, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a it's not something I'm into. Okay, so these are all heading down. One of those is starting to head back. Okay. So let's see when... Well, we're going to get a combat ship, but no one's detected, so we can just 1, 2, 3, do the last 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you can see there's what's going on. It doesn't often happen like this. This is a bit different from my last 2 games. So we're entering turn 5, and we haven't ruled out some possible forces, but now I'm just, not for the sake of it, I'm just going to leave them where they are. The Americans are going to do an S turn to starboard, so to try and catch up with them whilst keeping those on their port bow. And we get two checks, both detections in the first, but both sides detections in the first movement phase. So everyone's going to move one, and then we'll go for detection. Okay, so the Japanese on here first. Yes, they have immediate 10, that's going to be immediate fire. So they're going to be immediately firing with, and then this hidden force here, it gets a 2, so that's definitely not going to see them. These two both get a go, a 1 and an 8, so this nearer one's going to get a possible immediate fire. So we'll draw those force markers, and we have something. Okay, so that one's ruled out, but worryingly we have a size 2 force here ready to slip off the map, but fortunately they're going to be in battle movement now, so they won't actually move off. Those ones almost slipped off. Just to reiterate, in mission movement you can move off, but now the forces are coming on, there's going to be enough Americans around about. They're going to enter battle movement, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so what we have here, well first, it's immediate fire, so they've detected the Americans, so we don't see what force it is, but what we have is on the counter, you can see number of ships is 3, torpedo salvo is 6, and torpedo limit is 12. So what that means is we now go to the Japanese hidden forces display. We find one with 12 circles on it, so that will be this hidden force number 2, and we're loosing off a possible 6 salvos in one go, maximum of 12, and before that force will not be able to fire anymore. And we go to the surprise torpedo attacks. So effective number of targets, so there's 3 American targets and they're at range 12 or more, and we're in the barrel broadside arc, we're not behind them. Okay, it's too far, so they won't actually fire torpedoes at that range. So I think I still leave that there, but the immediate fire does not occur. And if they were closer, they might well fire gunnery. I think hidden forces never fire gunnery, because I think actually there's a case when they're very close, they would reveal and fire gunnery. Okay, and and 11. In the excitement, I should have rolled for these two as well, for their detection. So we're at 10 and 11 range, and I rolled a 7 and a 3. So 3 is no result, and a 7 is detected. So yes, so the American force is now detected. So there's never, all they're detected by all possible Japanese. But there was no immediate fire from either of those, so they still remain hidden. And now there's the US detection. So US 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. They're going to try and detect this one. Oh, that's extreme radar detection range. So we need a 7, no, we're going to need a 9 or higher. I rolled a 5, so that's nothing, no dice. The second one, I think I'm going to leave those. I don't think there's anything we can do about that. I'll let that slip off and hope it's a dummy. So let's just see, do we get high roll H? Yes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's a possibility. We've detected them. Yes, on an 8 is a D detection. We get +1 from our Admiral as well. So that force is nothing. Okay. So we're running out of force markers. So we're going to be getting real forces coming out quite thick and fast now. So we go to the next movement segment. US is beginning their S turn, and all these continue movement. And the only other chit that might come out this turn now is combat. Okay. One thing you want to determine is, do you want to put your stern to possible enemy? Not too bad if they're that far away, but if they're not, you might not. You might delay your S turn till later or something like that. Okay, so the Japanese in this zone, they always will go that way to perform a transport attack mission, which is what they're after. So we're in the mid segment movement change. Okay, not so many forces to check now. And that one turns around and is deciding to come back around that way. Okay, so one. Okay, so the US, no, so the combat chit's coming out on the last movement phase. So we've got 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's the US S turn completed. And we have a hidden force that has moved off. Now I'll have to check the rules in a bit. I'll do that towards the end of the game to see. Essentially that's going to be victory points for the Japanese if it turns out to be a real force. Yeah, I'll have to check that now, in fact, won't I? Because what happens if a hidden force moves off the table, completing a mission? So I need to go to the mission types, and so the primary Japanese mission is transport attack. Light ships would turn. As soon as a Japanese ship leaves the map, note down that it performs. Okay. That's strange. Here. Hidden force is deployed into ship formation instantly. It enters either the supply zone or one of the 2 Japanese deployment zones. Oh, I didn't realise that. So, its component heavy ships will try to form. Okay. Yeah. So there's some subtle rules for determining movement. So that hidden force, I should have drawn a chit for it. And I found out it was a 1 force, and this 2 force has to have its ships determined, which gives us opportunity to go to the hidden forces table. So we'll first do the 1. So the force size value on the marker is 1. There's no modifier to this. I just roll, I get a 6, so that's 2 DDs. I'm not worrying if they're ahistorical or not, so I just draw any 2 DDs, and that force is off map, performing, I'll put them down here for now, performing transport attack. The Terrazuk and Hagikaz. Now, I don't know if destroyers would actually perform transport attack. I think so. Light ships can engage supply instead. Engage in supplying instead. I'll check that in a minute. The other force was a tour. So I rolled a 2 again, it's low, so that's 3 more destroyers, again just randomly pulled out. You can see they have a fired side when they're fired. Okay, so those ones are actually deployed according to this diagram if there's a screen or not, and you just randomly put them out one after the other. The screens are destroyers, but the main body in that case would be, you know, cruisers or battleships. So that force is on the map. Any Japanese ship can attack US transports. Okay. So I have to note down on the ship log that it's performed transport attacks. So we have the Terrazuk and the Nakikaz. So the Terrazuk is here and the Nakikaz is Hagikaz. Yes, you start to get to recognize their names. So these two are performing transport attacks turn 6, if that matters. A ship that exits the map to attack transports remains off map for 2 game turns and re-enters the preparation stage of the 3rd game turn. Okay, so they will come back on game turn 3 having attacked those American transports, and these ones are almost there. So I think that was that for that turn, wasn't it? Yes. Okay, so we go to game turn 6. And the action ships have gone back in the cup. The US, it's going to be 2-5. I've got my battleship in front. He's got a chance of trying to hit one of those. If we get the combat ship within two movement phases. Unlikely, so I think what we're going to do is they're going to turn 60 to the port and slow down to 3, speed 3, which is great because they're in a nice position now. It's going to be harder for the Japanese to detect them, but they're moving at full speed, so it'd be easier for the Americans to detect the Japanese. So 60 port marker and 3 speed marker, and just for for ease, I'll draw the first 3 chits. Oh, I should be rolling for the mission movement of these fellows. Okay, that one turns that way, and this one continues going around Southern Island. Okay, so what do we get? First 3 action chit draws. On the first one, nothing. On the second one, nothing. And on the third one, we get the US detection. Hooray! These markers are actually markers which you can use on the map to, in some scenarios, they change these numbers depending on what ships are likely to do, what their mission is in that particular scenario. They also, I didn't talk about these are called retirement numbers. So normally in mission movement, the Japanese are heading this direction. If they reach a certain damage level 3, or they've performed a mission, they then perform retirement movement, and they will be heading back that way until and unless they get into battle movement. Once you're in battle movement, you tend to stay in it unless there's no one around detected in your visual tracking range or radar tracking range, and then Japanese might move back into mission movement and try and head back off the map. No fighting going on. Okay, so that's on the third movement segment. So 1, 2, 3. So those all go off. And one's called the Kurusho. So Kurusho is that yellow doesn't really show up, does it? Okay. So the Kurusho and companions are performing transport attack 2. You can see these record hits, and that's the damage levels. That reduces speed and combat capability. And then these are torpedo tubes. This has one torpedo tube, but it's reloadable. The Americans don't have reloadable torpedo tubes, they just have 1 or 2 salvos. Where were we? Oh yes, so 3 hexes. So the US are going to turn 60. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You can turn either at the beginning. Now this is a thing. He was there because he hadn't finished the S turn, but he only gets 1 60-degree turn. So 1, 2, 3. So I did something wrong there, but you can see I think he should actually be in that position, but you can see he's heading in a different direction. If this was the end of the turn, he would come under column formation, under a different formation, unless we're in column, which we are. So that's actually fine. There's no problem. I think I did something odd there. That was like that. So it was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh no, okay, that's fine. And now I can remove that to show that I've done that. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so they're coming up round there. And we go for the US detection. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 7 and 9. So on the radar, that's 7 hexes. I rolled a 2, goes up to 3. Gives us a force marker. So we have a 1, a small force there. So approximate number of ships is 2. And it's only going to fire 4 salvo torpedoes up to a limit of 8. And the other one, I rolled an 8. Which is a detect result. So it goes up to 9 is an immediate fire. Okay, great. So this one is nothing, otherwise the US would have had immediate fire. So that one's gone. We're whittling them down pretty quick. So the mission movement here is 8 and 7, so these are changing direction, and this fellow goes that way. And when do we get the next chips? No, a Japanese detection after movement of 2. So 1, 2, Oh, hang on, I've gone down to speed 3, haven't I? So, yeah, so there's a chart which I actually put on here. It's in on one of these tables. So at 3 you move on 1, 2 and the 4th, so I'm okay with that. That's the complete American movement. Now 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then we get Japanese detection. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This could be risky. It could be another surprise torpedo attack. So on 8 to 9, yes, and it's an 8. Immediate fire. So this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a 9. That's going to be immediate fire as well. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. The other fellow's too far away to see. Okay, so I've drawn a 2 and a 1. Those are the chits I've already drawn. So we're at the Japanese strength level of 5, so that's 3. That brings it up to 4, which means I get another chit, and it turns out to be the 3. So this would be the last chit, but in fact there's no more to draw. So that hidden force can go away, and that is all the forces. So we got some nasty torpedoes coming towards us. So surprise torpedo attack. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes. So each ship is counted as 1. So that's 3 American ships. Effective number of targets 3. And I roll the die. I get a 9. Oh dear. So that's a 3 and a 1. What that means is that hidden force 9 gets a maximum of 8 salvos. And so I've spent 3 on turn 6, because in 2 turns the Japanese get to reload. And the bracket of 1 means there's 1 hit. So I have to choose a target, and they tend to go for the bigger, so it's going to be the Battleship. 1 hit is a 6. That's 4. Number of hits 4. Okay, so we have damage. You can see how it goes out of the blue. Torpedoes streaming towards my battleship. Fortunately, we haven't reached a damage state of 1 yet. Now, normally I would be moving to detection segment and first torpedo attack there. So just to keep track of where we are. And then the second one has immediate fire 2. So that's hidden force of 3, which is approximately 5 ships with a 20 limit here. So that they could fire off 10 salvos in one go. Now you could roll too high, in which case, you know, because like this force can only loose off 4 salvos in one go, and according to this table it might say there's a lot of American ships, so you're loosing 8 salvos, 3 hits, and then on a 1 to 7 you get an extra hit. But if I can only loose 4, I go down, down, down until it comes to 4, so it would actually only be 2 hits with a 1 in 10 chance of a possible 3rd hit. So anyway, so we got, again, there's 3 targets. I roll a 7, so that's 3 salvos fired, 0 hits, but 6 out of 10 chance, I roll 9 no, of 1 actual hit. So what was that? 3 salvos fired from here. Okay. And that is the Japanese detection segment. And so we know then that the combat chip is in the last segment. So they're still moving at 6. The US have completed all their movement. Do we need a second torpedo attack? That would be at a different target. So yes, I should have rolled for a second torpedo attack because they have salvos available. No, that one had fired 4 salvos. That's the most it can fire because you're determining, you know, few ships. That one could fire 10, so that one would have fired another salvo. 3, I rolled a 10, so that's 3 more off. 6, 6, 6 again. Nice number. And 1 hit with a possibility, no, just 1 damage, and that will be, we'll just say it would be at one of those two. So let's say it's on the Vincennes. 1 hit. Okay. So we go to gunnery attacks. So a large force might reveal itself, but that one's not going to be large enough, I don't think. Remove undetected markers, just damage markers, so we would record damage at this point. Flip attacking ships to fired size. Okay, and then we might continue, but we're not in this case. We did that extra movement, and now we get to the combat step. So the first attack step in the combat segment is US illuminate. There's no one to illuminate because they don't have any definite targets. Japanese combat, so again they get a surprise torpedo attack. So it's the same drill. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know why I was counting that. Don't need to. So 3 possible targets. I rolled a 3. That's 2 salvos. 1 in 6 chance of a hit. No. So and the other one, I rolled a 2 salvos, 1 in 2 chance. Yes, and there's 1 point of hit. So they've almost fired their maximum salvos, and 1 would be on the Vincennes. So what you would actually do is you would say, okay, these ones, that one's attacking that, and that one's attacking that. So you'd determine the targets for all the torpedoes and then resolve them, so you wouldn't see the first attack before determining who you're going to attack on the second. So I'm going to put another hit on the Vincennes because of that. So that's a Japanese segment. The US combat segment, so they would get to fire back, but they have not detected them. Again, they're just getting these torpedoes through the water. So we go to the second attack step. The Japanese get another go. Let's see, so with the 1 force, I rolled a 4, which is 2 salvos, 1 hit, and that is their no, they fired their total salvos this turn. Okay, so they can't actually fire anymore, and the other, they rolled a 4, 2, so it's 2 and 1. And their total salvos is 10, so they could just do that. Another 1 point of damage on the Vincennes. So now the Vincennes has reached damage level 1. So normally what I'd do is I'd put a marker on it, current step here, which is damage 1, and then we would mark that at the end. So now we go to US combat again. They can't fire back, adjust damage markers. So now I say okay, so he's actually got that damage, and the Japanese reload. And then there's another step, is that at the end of the turn you take the effects of the damage, so then his speed would be reduced by 3, and I think his firing is already reduced at this point. So the Japanese reload step, they've only just been firing, but in turn, when that happens in turn 8, they're going to reload their tubes. And that's the end of the combat step, and again the end of that turn. So we go to game turn 7. Put all the chits back. you can see it's a kind of chit heavy and dice heavy game, but it does give a stimulating experience of what's going on, and can I get in a shot before it's all over, kind of thing. Okay, so need to roll for their mission movement, and they're both sensibly going in that direction. Okay, and the Americans... I forgot their speed, because I was at low speed, it was -2 on detection, so they might not have taken those salvos. I'm going to keep them at speed 4. But, oh, silly me, they are detected anyway, aren't they? Yeah, so it doesn't make a difference. Okay. And they're just going to go straight ahead. So I'll just draw out the action sheets to see. So there's nothing happening in the first 3 segments. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That was silly. So the Japanese are going to move past them, aren't they? So I'll just check their movements again. Mission movement 9 and 5. So this one actually turns. He keeps going. Okay. So one more on the 4th, one more movement for the US, and then on the 5th, another move for these fellows, and then the US get detection. So at that range, surely they're going to do it. For detection, yes. So these ones are revealed. And 3, 4. These ones are also revealed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hang on. Yes, they are also revealed. So we can see which actual ships we have, but the Americans don't get immediate fire. In the next segment, they will. So the Japs will get to move on one further. And what do we get here? It's a 1 size 4, so I rolled a 7. So we get 3 DDs. Okay. So they will deploy in that fashion. Oh no, sorry. That's this one. So you can see we're actually moving through each other's spaces. I think it's 1,500 yards across a hex. So they're moving very close in the darkness, those forces. And here we get an interesting force. So we get 4 DDs on screen, and then a main force of 2 heavy cruisers and 1 light cruiser. Okay, so the screens will go like this. So they're heading this direction, and the main force will go like this. Oh, so that's CA and 1 CL, like that. So that is the interesting situation. We're reaching at the end of game turn 7 out of 10. The Japanese have already completed some bombardments, so they'll be winning on victory points. The Americans only have a chance if they can keep these from going off, which they have a good chance now. As long as they can stay afloat, keep them engaged, and they need not to be sunk themselves, but to sink some of these fellows. You can see my force is quite small, but I do have a battleship. So we go to the combat segment. First attack step, if undetected, none, so we only have one attack step. Japanese will go first. Now there's going to be tons of torpedoes. Now I have to take a bit of time to mark the ships and which ones have, so I have to distribute the torpedoes that were fired amongst them. So what do we have? We have the Shuriuk, okay, the Yukikaz, and the Amatkaz. And they had fired a total of 4 torpedoes between them. So we just randomly assign those. 1, 2, 3, and that one gets 2. And we have to remember to mark. Oh, we can go beyond 10 game turns. I didn't realise that. The game turn track marker has a +10 on it. I thought that was the end of the game, so maybe we just carry on until someone breaks off or sinks completely. Okay, so there are some torpedoes free in that force that can still fire, and on the other side we have the Takao heavy cruiser and the Karo heavy cruiser. No, the Takao and Kako heavy cruisers with the Yubari light cruiser. Yubari light cruiser. Okay, there. And then the Udashi, Mikazuk in starboard, and the Mikazuk in starboard screen, and the Hamakaz and Fubuki in port screen. Okay, and they had fired a total of 10 torpedoes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Even the heavy cruisers get torpedoes on the Japanese side. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so what do they have left? Now we have to assign targets, and you can fire through enemy ships but not through friendly ships. So the Shuriuk, the Yukikaz and the Amatkaz are all going okay, there's only 2 torpedoes that can be fired, 2 salvos rather, so they will do those now, and that's giving combined strength of 7. So we go to a different torpedo attack, and they're all going to fire on the California. Going to a different torpedo attack table now. It's 7, and we get modifiers. We are in the stern arc, so we get a -1, but it's at short range, so that's +2, so net +1 on the torpedo values, and that's +1 each. So we're actually on 9 here, and they're all on 8. Modified target speed, we're at 4, so we're not on fire. Not surprised. Okay, and it's not return fire, so that's 8. So that is 5. 5 points of damage against torpedo damage against the California. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's getting damage step of 1. Okay, that's those. Then these will fire at the nearest target here because it is a heavy ship. These ones, he's going to fire at the Vincennes, and these ones won't be able to fire torpedoes. So the Hammerkaz and the Fubuki, there are rules judging this. I won't go through them and take time to look them up. It's basically they're going to target the heaviest ship that's closest and backwards like that. So Hammerkaz and Fubuki. Hammerkaz has no torpedoes available. The Fubuki does, and they are centrally located, so that's fine. Can fire on either arc, because you have a bow arc spreading out this way, and then you have a starboard arc, a port arc, and a stern arc. Nobody can fire torpedoes through their stern arc. If you have a centrally located torpedo, it can fire from both sides, anywhere except the stern. If it was starboard, it could fire starboard and bow arc. So you can see you've got a big arc, even for a restricted torpedo, to fire. Simulating the ship isn't just rigidly heading in that direction. You know, it's a destroyer. It's moving around, weaving. So to get its shot off. So that was a 3-pointer, and it's close range, so that goes up to 5. So on this column I rolled a 5. You can see the US column's worse for torpedoes, and they don't have those long lances, and that's a 0. If it was an N, it means I would rub it off. So they spent the torpedo, it missed. An N would mean they actually decide against taking that shot. Okay, so they missed, and then the only other possible was the Yubari. So the Yubari was, which one was that? Oh, the Yubari is a light cruiser, and he's fired, so he needs to reload. So that's it with the torpedoes. The Americans were lucky with that. Now the Japanese get a gunnery attack. So DDs will fire at DDs if possible, because destroyers, their armaments are not going to penetrate battleship armour very easily, or at all, perhaps, maybe only cause damage from plunging fire. So that's not possible in this case, so they're going to go against the next best, which is the Vincennes there. So we're now going to gunnery combat. We have to check, we've got visual fire detection range, and okay, we're fine. And then what we do is we check the gunnery row shifts, and you see what you have is you have your bow and stern primaries, and the bigger ships also have secondaries. So in this way, the Vincennes is not in the bow arc, so it would have to be to the sides, but not the stern. So he can only bring 10 points to bear on the Vincennes. They can both bring their full 15 to bear. So we have 40 points of damage. And what we do, 40 points of attack capability, what we do is we have 4 decks for light ships, light cruisers, heavy cruisers, and battleships. And you simply flip a card, and in each deck there's a reshuffle card. And then you would check the range, short, medium, or long, and we had 40 damage points, so we'd go to the 30 row, and you see there's nothing, so there's no actual damage caused, no special damage like, you know, causing a fire, so nothing. Oh, sorry, last thing, that was the wrong set. Anyway, that would be against destroyers. We're firing against a heavy cruiser, so again, that's an unfortunate card that there's no attack. So these guys, they can bring all their primaries to bear. Now, if they had, they could possibly separate them between 2 targets, and there's rules determine that, but in this case he's the closest. They don't have equal targets, so they're bringing 30 to bear. And so we're not using primaries against more than one target. Return fire, no. Do you have a damage level marker? No. Same hex as targets, that should have been up 1, but it didn't have any effect. Target speed, etc. Okay, so no modifiers. So again, we're on 30, and now it's a bit different. So we're at short range still against the CA with 30, so we cause 1 point of damage against the New Orleans. Okay, but he hasn't reached a damage level yet. So then finally, this fellow, he can just bring to bear on the New Orleans too. So, but that would not be short range. Does short range have an effect on this? No. Sorry, the short range is on there, wasn't it? So he's bringing 30, and I at medium range. 30 at medium range. So even at short range, he wouldn't have damaged anything. So that is the total Japanese attack. Then we go to the US combat. So they get 1 or maybe 2 torpedo attacks. They would have to be from the same ship if possible. Like he could fire 2 salvos. They'd have to be at different targets. He could fire maybe 1 from his starboard and 1 from the port. They could only ever fire 1 salvo, and that's it, it's gone. So first torpedoes attacks, what do we have? Well, in actual fact, no torpedoes at all, so it's purely gunnery combat. This is going to be fun, or not. Now we could fire through, this one can't fire through friendlies, but he can fire through these at the cruiser here. So I'm going to say that's what the New Orleans does with his bow against there. That's only 4, so no, I don't think. Yeah, okay. His bow of 4 against the Takao. Now that's a cruiser, so 1, 2, 3, it's medium range. So we're on the bottom here, and nothing. That was a bit of a hopeful shot. Okay, but then he's still got 8 to bear. Oh, I'd have to bring it down 1 because he's using his primaries against more than 1 target. So I could add them to that and bring it down 1, or draw 2 separate cards. And what's he doing there? Oh yeah, he's gonna bring his other. He should have fired all his primaries against there, silly man. Okay, 8. And he's in the same hex, so we go up 1. Okay, that's a reshuffle card. I won't bother to do that now since we've hardly drawn anything. So it's against a DD, and we have 8. We go up 1, short range 3. So that's 3 points against the Shiriok. And yeah, he's effectively dead in the water, but still afloat, not sinking yet. Okay, then the Californian's going to bring all his primaries to bear against a single target. Oh, I forgot the split. I should have taken him down a level for that, but never mind. Just for the purpose of illustration, we'll keep going. 12 against, at short range against a DD, is at just 1 point against the Yukikaz. And I'll just show you the spreads. So you have a rough idea. We could have got 12 points against DD at short range. We could have got 4 points, or 2, or 3, or 3. You see how it is. It just depends on what you manage to draw. And now the Battleship. This is going to be possibly the most spectacular. So we have 14 against the amateurs. I'm just going to put all on 1, at 14 and 14 twice. I could also fire second. No, I can fire either secondaries or primaries. 24 against the DD at short range. Still only 3 points of damage with that one. Okay. Amit does here. 1, 2, 3. So they take 3 on the current step, and that is the end of that turn. Again, that is the end of the combat. We would adjust damage markers. So now I might add more. Well, we do that adjustment, and as it happens to the end of the turn, we go to the terminal stage. Fire phase. First, someone might have caught fire. So some... for example, here there was actually a special result. Japanese illuminated. So for some reason, he's illuminated just in this combat sequence. So other fire against him would get a bonus. And so some special results might cause a fire, so then I'd roll on the fire, and generally you take an extra point of damage. If you roll 10, there might be an explosion, or you might manage to put the fire out on a 4 and below. Then we go to the damage effects phase. So now I need to mark that these ones now speed is reduced by 3, so their maximum speed is 3. And where was the other fellow? Here. 3, and the California has a damage step, so his speed goes down to 5. So what that means is that this formation, Japanese formation, will travel at a maximum speed of 3 now, unless it breaks up into separate formations, and I haven't been through the rules for that yet. And likewise for the American, but they'll still be travelling at 6. Counter adjustment phase. So like I took those counters off. If you were sinking, you would remove the ship and so forth. Retirement phase. Now, in fact, yes, those 2 ships will now perform retirement movement. So they'll now be rolling on the yellow. So you can see that they're going to about turn and head back up the slot because they're on damage level 3. Japanese withdrawal phase. Now, if there's a number of Japanese ships have been sunk, you will roll, and depending on the Japanese strength level and the roll, their whole force might decide to withdraw, in which case they will follow those yellow arrows again. And the end of turn phase, which brings us back to game turn 8. Now, I'm not going to keep going on, but you can see now these will come back on here. And these ones are still steaming. The Americans have managed to knock out a couple of destroyers or badly damage them, but that is it. There's a heavy force going there. And what this is going to mean is that the Americans have put 2 destroyers at damage level 3, so they're on 6 victory points. The Japanese have put a battleship on damage level 1, so they've got 3 victory points. But they've also have 6 destroyers have transport attacked, which gives them 12, so they're on 15 victory points against the American 4. And so the Americans really have to stop these, because if those couple of those CAs get in, that's another 10 victory points for going on to the transport attack. It's going to be tricky. I mean, the force that I have there is not very strong, and I think I would just steam off and leave the Japanese to it, because I don't really... I could possibly engage these at long range and wait for them to have exhausted the destroyers and so forth, to have exhausted their torpedoes, but that can take quite a while. I mean, the Japanese might get 1 reload, but they will exhaust them eventually. Like I said, it might take a while, and we might be sunk before we can then start engaging them safely at long range with our guns. Now I'm just going here to show the US ship table. So, you know, if I'd been, say, average, although you don't have an average on the 1d10, but in a middle range, I could have had 5 destroyers, 5 CLCAs, which effectively could have been 5 destroyers, so I get some torpedoes, although the American torpedoes are not that useful, not compared to the Japanese. They're a lot more pot luck, whereas the Japanese is more, you're going to do some damage if you fire off a few salvos. So I tend to swap up destroyers. That's my feelings at the moment, to swap up destroyers for CAs. So I could get 1 CA out of that. So, and out of 3 of those, I could get a battleship. So I could end up in the medium range with a battleship, 2 CAs and a destroyer, or even 2 battleships and a destroyer. You will be able to take more damage from torpedoes before sinking, but you will have no torpedo attacks, which obviously gives you more attacks in each combat segment. So, you know, you have to make your decision. The greatest I could get would be, I think that doesn't make sense because there's no modifier on the DD roll as far as I know. Perhaps there is on some scenarios. But generally the greatest I would get is 7 destroyers, 6 CL. So that could be, say, 2 battleships, 1 heavy cruiser or light cruiser, and then 3 destroyers, which would be a nice force. 2 battleships, a cruiser and 3 destroyers. But you see, but then I still might be up against an even stronger Japanese force from this. But I don't think it ever really, unless you get the extremes, you get an extremely strong American force versus an extremely weak Japanese force, which would be 2 1s and 2 2 strength markers, which would basically would give them light cruisers at the most on 8s to 10s. On a roll, 1 light cruiser. So at that end, the Americans, I think, have a decent chance. But on the average, they're going to be well outgunned, particularly in torpedoes. They might well outgun in battleship armament. But those torpedoes, the Japanese, because they have so many of them, are a lot more effective, and they can fire them often before the Americans have even detected the Japanese. I mean, the Americans can do that, but you can see the Japanese have so many hidden forces, they get a much greater chance of that. It's a tough game for the Americans. And I'm going to finish that there now, because that's been an extremely long video, and as you can see, the game would go on, but the outcome is tenuous. Going to be tenuous for the Americans at best. I hope that's given you some idea of how the game plays. What we didn't get was battle movement. I just last minute to show you that. Essentially, I don't really need to show you, but essentially a formation will move in sync to this. So you would get the US reference ship, which would be the greatest threat. So that, for these fellows, that would be this ship, and the direction he's heading is that way, which means these fellows are, I think, in this sector. The nearest one is in this sector. So you'd roll, and you would see if they're heavy ships, it's blue result. If they're lighter ships, it's the red result. But you would see on a 9. The lighter ships are going to tend to follow. The heavier ships, not so much. They will more take an oblique course, or perhaps even head completely the opposite direction. The lighter ships will be following to fire the torpedoes. And so you see which sector you are in, and you can see if, in relation to that American force here, the Japanese are here, they're going to be tending to go in that way. That way, if they're directly behind, they're only going to follow them. And if they're directly in front, they're going to be turning around and coming this way. So you can judge roughly what the Japanese are going to do, but you don't know. They might one half of a turn, if they're in this sector, be going this direction. Then the next half they will suddenly turn, going the opposite direction. So you cannot sort of plot their movement and say, okay, it's going to take them 3 hexes to go this far, and I can place myself at this on this hex according to that. The likelihood is they will be there. That will be a perfect position for me, and I'll get them. You can never do that. You know roughly what they're going to do, and position yourself according to that. But that is the best you're going to get.